Hello, Katina.
There we go.
Hello, how are you all?
We're doing okay.
Good. Oh, you're on the Muppets today.
Version of Zoom.
So
Oh,
you just got the
wonderful.
Zoom backgrounds, huh?
Well,
Somehow I
hi
didn't
there.
think you had a water tower in your backyard.
I thought I'd get rid of that one for a while.
I like Fozzie.
He was always my favorite too.
Me too. I could relate to Fozzie.
Yeah.
I could relate to Ralph the dog.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hiya, Marcia. How's Paul doing?
He's
I'm
right
right
here.
There.
Hello, Paul's
I
hand.
recognize that hand everywhere.
Yep.
I still have a check that belongs to you guys, Jonathan.
Sarah.
You still have what?
I have a check that belongs to you guys. Do you want me to just tear it up?
A check?
Yeah,
Ooh.
it was written for the contact banquet, and then you all couldn't go, and
Oh,
I haven't opened my wallet for so long. I came across this the other day, and I said, "Oh, gee, I need to return that." Or I could just tear it up.
you probably should tear it up. What is if it's been more than 60 days? I don't think they'll cash it.
Yeah, it was the 29th of February. So it's been a while.
I have to
I don't
apologize.
know.
My
I think
camera has
Gresham-
to find it,
Gresham
so
Middle
I have
School
no idea. where
Cash
it
one.
Gresham Middle School cashed one?
That was over a year old one time for Paul's, when he was at Gresham for his school fees that they had misplaced, and they cashed it and the bank honored it.
Wow.
Through my bank account all up, he's like, whoa.
Who is Julia Caprio?
She is a member she was a member in New Hope, and she has been coming with June Warner.
Oh, I know who she is.
She's
Okay.
a precious lady. Yeah.
Yes, I know who she is. Okay, good. The name didn't ring a bell, but she wants to come help on Friday too.
She would be great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
That's eight. That's 8.
that's 8 of us. Yeah.
Yay.
Wow.
How's your mom doing?
She's fine. Apparently I've lost her. She's here. She'll be here in a minute.
Okay, good.
Well, the dog's coming first. But.
Well, is the physical therapist still putting your mother through the paces?
Yep, they were here yesterday, and then the occupational therapist and the nurse will be here tomorrow.
Well, I should say, is your mother putting them through the paces?
Them and others.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Susu's come to class.
Oh,
Well, I tell you, I felt like I was back in a religious studies seminar on the video. It's stretching my interpretations. This is interesting.
it did actually. This week I'm in classes for my DMIN program, and I think this study probably stretched me more than most of the stuff I've done for DMIN this week.
Well, it's called you have to go back and rethink just about every step of the way. I love the fact that of his reinterpretation of the Gospels, Yeah. What's your take on his putting Luke as the last, not John?
You know, I need to do some research on why he's doing that, because chronologically it was not the last.
No.
And it's not in scriptures. I'm not sure what his reasoning for that is. I need to dig a little bit.
Could it be because he feels the Gospel of Luke is the first step that leads right into Acts or something?
Could be.
He's putting Luke and Acts together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's doing. He also is following the 4 steps that of the
Passover
process that we go through in this process that he's started us on, and that's the last one is Luke Acts.
Okay.
In the model that he's using, that's the way I understand it, which comes directly out of the stuff with what's his name? I can't think of the guy's name.
The author is Alexander Shea, I think it's his last name.
Yeah, but the guy he was quoting from with the 4
He quoted
steps.
the other guy.
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell.
Right.
Joseph Campbell. Thank you. Yeah. That's a segment of Campbell's book on religion and myth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole segment in there talking about how the different religions use different formats or different ways of connecting to the holy, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, it seems to me with us going through these four studies that we could get maybe an associate DM, whatever you call it, D-men.
Yeah.
Yeah, or D-men light.
That's right. You're all little demons in my eyes. Huh?
Yeah, right. Well,
Is that demons or demons?
How are your studies going?
They're very well. The professor has been delightfully accommodating with the fact that we're all home. We're not in Dubuque as planned. So we still have work duties and family duties and home duties and so forth. And so she actually decided to stretch it. And rather than do everything this week, she stretched it out over the next month. So we have a little bit each week over a period of time rather than all in 1 week. So that's good in that we have less to do compacted in a week, but it drags it a little bit longer. So, but she's been wonderful and the classes are wonderful. The group is wonderful. So. Uh-oh, I'm sticking.
Good.
Uh-oh, my internet's saying it's unstable, so we're going to hope for the best. Oh.
That's all right. Most of us are unstable too.
That's right. We'll fit right in. Well,
Hello,
hey,
everybody.
Hello, Lucille.
How are you all doing?
We're doing great. How about you?
I'm doing okay.
Well, how about we start off with a word of prayer, and we kind of have already hopped in, but we'll hop back in after we say a word of prayer together. Let's pray. Holy One, we give you thanks for this time in the middle of our week to pause and to dive into your word and hear your summons into the journey. God, we ask that you would help us to be willing participants in whatever it is that the Spirit is leading us into, that you would mold us and make us yours so that we would follow you and lead others into the path of Christ. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So I've heard it was a challenging study. It stretched you a little bit. Any initial thoughts right off the bat?
Well, my initial thought was, gee, this seems familiar. It's what I watched last week instead of what I was supposed to have done.
Oh, no.
Neither did I.
He watched it last week instead of what he was doing.
Oh, well, I bet that's why you said it was longer than I told you it was. I bet that's why.
He had
Well,
watched
I
it last week
think what I
instead
said
of
was
what
as
he
longer than I
watched.
expected. But
So,
yeah,
so we are on Matthew this week, right?
Yes,
We are.
this week is Matthew.
Okay, just checking.
I like that. Well, going back to the Jewish way of starting the day at sundown, I
Yeah.
like that you go through, you begin, and it gets darker and darker, and then the day lightens up. I like that. I like that. It's hopeful.
As Christians, we practice that some, particularly at Easter. A lot of churches have an Easter vigil, which actually happens Saturday night, beginning at sundown, because that's when Easter begins. That's the beginning of the Eastertide. It's Saturday evening at sundown. And so we got to get to experience that as Christians. It's not as common in the Reformed tradition, which is a shame. I think we lose that. Maybe we'll have to bring it back sometime.
Stuff in that background that you
That
have.
vigil.
Muppets.
Seems like I remember our church doing that vigil one time.
Yeah, I've done it several times over the years in churches that I've served.
Started it Friday night,
Kind of a
even.
downer.
Kind of a downer.
Yeah, we've done Tenebrae on Friday night. In fact, we've done it. New Hope and Powell Presbyterian did it together
We did,
Yeah.
sure.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
What else stuck out at you? Anything that gave you pause, you weren't so sure about?
Well, it clarified something for me when he was talking, because I didn't understand it the first time I listened to it again yesterday. I did the same thing that Jonathan did. I watched that one last week as well.
Kindred spirits.
Yes. When he was talking about that Matthew is speaking specifically to a Jewish community that's in conflict, that never crossed my mind in terms of what Matthew is about, because it's written to a group of people in the city of Antioch after the temple has fallen.
Right.
And the priesthood is no more. And I never made that connection until I heard that the second time when I went back through it. It made a lot of sense as to what's going on in the Gospel of Matthew, because I think it's John Shelby Spong says that Matthew follows the cycle of the Jewish church year. That each of the events that are listed in the gospel, as he moves through the gospel from the beginning to the end, follows from Passover through, Sukkoth, all of the different festivals, and each one of those, the different stories fit into different portions of that story as he goes through. And I thought that was, when he explained that's who he's writing, a community of Jews that he's writing to, that made a lot of sense to me.
Well, and talking to that community of Jews, also made his approach make a little bit more sense when he was saying you cannot go back.
That's right.
We have to, take Jesus's hand and go forth into the unknown, but there will be hope at the end or whatever, and that makes sense because those people had lost everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, that kind of drove that home, how complete that destruction was.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason for it was surprising.
Yeah.
I never thought of Passover being a call to rebellion.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting, he was careful to say he did not want to annihilate the Jews. He just wanted to annihilate the Jewish church, the Jewish faith.
The faith.
Yeah, faith. He said he was no Hitler, or they were not Hitler.
He made that point a couple of times, and I guess I can see that, but the outcome was pretty similar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It was.
And that's when the spread of Jews throughout the empire began in earnest, was after the fall of the temple, what we call the diaspora. And
well, I thought the diaspora had actually gone on quite a bit before that.
Somewhat, but it became even more prominent after the temple fell. People were leaving Israel in huge numbers.
Right, I can see that. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting too when he talked about how if we only have the Old Testament, our idea of God is limited. And
Yes.
you know that Jesus said, "You have heard, but let me tell you some more." You know.
Yeah, and he put that in the context of unlearning. What did he say? That you have heard what I said, now I say to you, to sow intentional confusion. Why? Because you have to move beyond the past.
Yeah.
That was pretty phenomenal, I thought.
To get to new learning, you have to go through unlearning.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And that's the way it was in the early church too when it came to baptism. They had to put off certain behaviors and so on before they could even step into the baptismal waters. They had to put everything of the old way out of their lives. And then they could step into the baptismal waters. And when they step out of it, they step into a new way of life, a new way of living, so to speak. That was the purpose of baptism, was the washing away of the old and bringing in the new.
When I know when I was baptized and we stepped into the pool, which for me was scary because at that time I could not swim. And so they would say, you're dying to sin and you're rising in newness of life, and arise, my Christian sister, and walk in newness of life, or whatever. And I was just glad that I had survived and had not drowned in the pool.
Yeah.
We had another brief story. There was a Baptist church in town whose church building burned to the ground. This has been 25, 30 years ago. And they did not think, they simply got the old blueprints and they built back the church exactly as it was before the fire. And that church has struggled ever since.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Some ways it's a
the
metaphor.
issue of going back to the building committee too soon.
Yes, they did. It was kind of like they simply wanted it to be like it used to be, and time moved on, but their church didn't. So
I think that's probably a pretty common feeling. I mean, there's a comfort in the way it used to be.
yeah.
Yes. Well, I think that's what goes on in society. Things are you're more comfortable with what we're familiar with. That's why people are having so much trouble now in this pandemic. Everything is so different than what it has been before, and people are panicking, and they don't know how to deal with it. I don't think.
How timely this study is coming in the pandemic, because the ones who are going to come out the best are probably those who can let go of the way it used to be and grab on to faith and trudge on to something better at the end, we hope. So,
and he reiterates that several times throughout as he goes through this,
right.
talking about leaving everything behind. This is something totally different, something totally new, and anytime change comes, there's going to be conflict.
I thought about
what was that he said? Go beyond hope to knowing.
To knowing.
Right.
Knowing that there is something out there waiting for you. That's the way I heard him say it.
In terms of the joining of our two churches too, and it's different for all of us, and I think that it's working well, but it could have been very different.
Yes, it could have been, but you all were wonderful. So
you guys were too.
You didn't realize you were getting a whole bunch of crazy, though, did you?
That's it.
Oh, we're not crazies. Now, wait.
I think it has a lot to do with the leadership.
That's right, yeah.
Yep.
I had the same thought about you, that you all did. This was so timely. I even marked a quote that he said, in the midst of this chaotic, cataclysmic moment, this is not about shame, blame, or apocalypse, nor is it a matter of emotional paralysis. It's a matter of put your hand in your heart and mine, and let's get back to work. And I thought, that's exactly right. It's us trying to figure out, it doesn't look the same. It doesn't look the same. But if we just froze up and said, you know, in emotional paralysis, that would be the end of the church. And instead, we put our trust in Jesus Christ and move forward into a new way of worshiping. So I thought, yes, absolutely. We were in the Matthew. We're in the summons of this journey.
As he was talking about that, I kept thinking of the song, Put Your Hand in the Hand.
Yes, me too. But you have to be of a certain age to know that one.
Put your hand in the hand of the man who still the water.
Yeah, we're done.
Well, obviously, the pandemic is a really an easy gimme example of this sort of summons area. But I want you to take a second and think about, it could be the church as a whole, or it could be your family, or you as an individual. But think about a time that you were really on the onset of change, just not quite to the top of the mountain, on the way up, a time that you realized change was coming. It might have been something out of your hands. It may have been a situation in your life that was becoming unmanageable, something you realized just can't go on anymore. Think about a time when you were right on the precipice of change. And try to put yourself there emotionally. And you don't necessarily, you're welcome to, but you don't have to tell us about the experience. But instead, I want to know, what does your heart feel like? What is the condition of your heart in this preparatory stage? How does it feel to be there?
But for me, the hard part was when I was getting ready to retire. And part of that, the reason why I made the choice to go ahead and retire, was the church that I was serving could no longer afford to keep paying me. And they went with a part-time pastor, a stated sort of a commissioned lay pastor instead. And just the fear of stepping into something totally different and not knowing what was going to happen next. And that was shortly after my dad had died and all that took place. And here I am having to make the decisions about having to come back to Tennessee, not knowing what I'm getting into until I got down here. And the fear that came along with that, Sarah's laughing, she knows what I'm talking about. So, and on the fears that went along with that. And I think anytime we're faced with those kinds of things, it does produce a great sense of fear. And terror. You know, you're terrified. Am I going to be able to make it? Am I going to be able to survive? Am I going to be able to live on what I'm going to get, you know, from Social Security or from pension or whatever? Those questions, you know, and they're still there, even though it's been 5 years now, and still there. So what can I, you know, what do you do? And I keep coming back to the one phrase that my grandmother taught me when I was growing up: trust in the Lord and the fullness thereof, and you will be okay. That was her watchword. And she taught that to me over and over and over again. Anytime something went wrong, she says, trust in the Lord and the fullness thereof, and you'll be okay. And that's what I've done. That's all I can do.
Yes, that is all you can do. I heard you say, I think I counted 4 times you said fear, and once terror. So that's pretty strong emotions. Lots of fear and terror. You all have similar experiences? Standing on the precipice of change evokes fear? Other things?
Loneliness, I think.
Loneliness.
Anxiety.
Feeling of loss.
I've moved across the country about 3 times, and each time it was exciting.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know, I knew where I was going, but I didn't know what it was going to be like. And it was exciting.
Our natural one was to think back a year ago. In fact, it was exactly 52 weeks ago last Sunday that New Hope had its last service. And I hadn't been there. I'd only been there 20 years, but there were, like Jennifer was baptized there, and there were so many memories, and so many hopes that had that had come and had gone, and we didn't. It was just a feeling of loss. Yeah.
Yeah. That hadn't even occurred to me that was this last weekend.
It was.
Yeah.
The world's been upended.
Yeah. And the thing that was really weird, when you said that, it made me realize that the day we closed the church, that last Sunday, was the Sunday that I was ordained in that church. It was the same Sunday that I was ordained in at New Hope.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in this experience that you are thinking about right now, did you hear an apocalyptic voice? It may not have been you probably didn't hear a sound from a bush or anything like that. And as Shea reminds us, you may have heard the apocalyptic voice that leads you into terror, which he said, disregard that one. He said, listen to it. It teaches us the level of change that we're currently in, but know for the most part, it's not the great truth of this moment, and move on. So did you hear an apocalyptic voice, one that led you farther into it or maybe encouraged you to run? You may not have.
I know several years ago, we had a man who was a member and got mad at the pastor or something anyway. And he left, and he said, this church is going to die. This was like 15 years ago. It was Bill Ball,
Yeah.
Jennifer. And he said, we're going to die. And he said, you might as well just, close it up and leave. And this was like in 2006, something like that.
Yeah.
And Lucille said, no, it's not. And if that's the case, I'll be there to turn out the lights.
And she was.
And she was.
And that happened to be 13 years later.
And even so, she turned the lights on in another building.
She certainly did.
Churches do not die. They may change shape.
That's
Yes.
right.
Churches are not closed right now. They're out in the world doing the work.
Right.
What needs to be done.
In fact, I think there are a lot of apocalyptic voices that are trying to sound right now during this pandemic.
Yes.
That the ones that are saying that the churches are closed. And
yes. All the things that come across Facebook and other media saying that we're in the midst of the end times. This is it. That we're heading towards the ultimate Armageddon, and everything's going to come to an end. And I just shake my head and say, we don't know when that's going to be. Jesus even says, don't worry about it.
yeah. But one thing I heard like on NPR this afternoon, the people that have lost their jobs and are having trouble getting through to get help.
Yes.
And those they would really be the first ones I'm thinking who could fall subject to some of the apocalyptic warnings.
For them, it's very scary.
And it's very real. It's very real. So, I mean, if they can make it through, you know, anybody can make it through.
The areas, the research has shown that the areas where that whole mindset is across what we now call the Bible Belt, particularly in the Deep South. For some reason, I don't know why people up north don't seem to see it that way, but those in the Deep South still do, and they don't see an end coming. In fact, some of them wish it would come anyway, want it to come anyway, because they want to see the new heaven. Yeah, they want to see the new heaven and the new earth. They don't want to see the old world. They want it now.
Certainly, I think some people are more susceptible to getting stuck in the darkness than others are. You know, if we're going to begin in the darkness and emerge into the light, that requires you to be able to make it through the darkness first. And that is not an easy task for those without hope and the means to do so. We're running out of time. I'm going to share with you really quickly. You can, I'm sure you can all read this on your own, but I want us to look at it together. Can you see this on your screen?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. If people are blocking your view, you can move that little black box to the bottom and get them out of the way. So this is from the NRSV, Matthew 28, the last chapter of Matthew. This is the resurrection and the sort of the wrap up of Matthew. And I want us to read particularly, since we're running out of time, we'll skip down. I'm going to start at the second paragraph here. While they were going, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests everything that had happened. After the priests had assembled with the elders, they devised a plan to give a large sum of money to the soldiers, telling them, "You must say his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So they took the money and did as they were directed. All this story is still told among the Jews to this day. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them, and when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." So Shea's claim in here is that this is actually not an ending, as it feels very much like we have wrapped it up and we've ended the story. But this is not an ending, but rather this is the ending of the first chapter, the prologue, leading us into the next step. So in what ways would this call us into the journey? How would this passage, this bit of Matthew, call us into the next step?
He's sending us out in unknown territory to do his will and to trust in him and to go into whatever unknown place, situation he leads, and to trust him to get us through it.
Yep.
And to come to something better.
It's the church motto, follow, love, and go.
Well said.
I haven't heard that one in a long time.
Too long.
Well, that would be a terrible ending, though, wouldn't it? If your mission statement was the end of the story, that would be a terrible, terrible mission statement.
Well,
that's the end.
Oh, that's the end.
I'm thinking ahead to the next one, which is the Gospel of Mark. When you get to the end of that one, that's a totally different ending, but it's the same idea. You know, they went back and they were afraid.
They were
And
afraid.
he stops
Yeah.
It
but it's
stops
like,
there.
okay, get ready. We're starting the journey, and we
Yes.
go out in faith with Jesus. Yeah, into territories we do not know. So, the new world.
I love the question, are you trying to sell us uncertainty? And the answer is yes.
Yep.
So you all
You must have been
described
paying that heckler.
you all described your experience of being in this position as fear, a lot of fear, terror, loneliness, anxiety, loss, and a little bit of excitement. Would those be appropriate words to describe the journey that Matthew is calling us into?
Yeah.
Yes,
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Except some of us are too thick-headed to be scared.
We'll send you in first. You're one of the spies.
I'll
We'd be
go.
fine for that.
Years ago, I'd have been right with Jonathan, but I don't know. The older I get, the less I'm interested in all that excitement.
Oh,
No
you've
more
noticed
shopping.
I haven't moved cross country in a long time.
Oh, yeah.
No, I can see Marcia and Paul right out there leading the way. I'll take notes.
Oh yes, yeah, me too, Sarah. I'm one of the fear and terror people. So yeah.
I like Jennifer's background. It makes me laugh.
Well, we are wrapping. We have about 3 minutes left, according to mine. Is there anything that you all had marked? I don't want to close this up without you all being able to say something that you had really wanted to bring up.
Again, he noticed at the beginning when he was talking about all the gods, all that kind of stuff. He said 5 times in that list.
5
he
women.
mentions people who the world would discount, and God used those people for his purposes.
Right.
You know, which means there's hope for all of us. You know.
That's right.
I like the idea that to be transformed, that you have to go beyond knowing to hope. Yeah. If you only know, that's why I get upset, because people say, well, God is such and such. If God is just what we can know, he's not big enough.
Right. Yeah.
Goes beyond that.
Well, I marked something that he said, which I thought was just the perfect prayer. So I will share it with you. It's a short little prayer, but I think perfect. He said, God, Jesus, Spirit, Mother, do help me do what you are asking me to do in my inner life for my own growth and my continued transformation. Amen.
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 Wonderful. It is lovely to see all of you. I will encourage you to watch the service on Sunday, because I've got a couple surprises for you in there, which I think will be fun for you. So yes, so check out the service on Sunday. I hate that we aren't together for Pentecost, but it'll be fun.
Well,
from
we're
afar.
ready.
Well, Harley's been coming to church with us too, so I actually took her picture of being part of the service a couple of Sundays ago.
Oh, wonderful. We need to have a, my view from the pew, have everybody take a picture where you're sitting watching the service. I think that'd be fun.
He wants to send that to you. Sure, I'm sure.
I would love it. Bill, that's lovely. If you'll send it to me, I'll get it in the service.
I sent it to you.
Oh,
Didn't I send it?
you did.
thought I
You just
did.
weren't in it. Your
Oh, okay.
picture wasn't in it.
Oh, my picture wasn't in it. Oh, I had it on my face so you couldn't see me.
That's well, it is lovely to see all of you. I hope that you're well, and we'll do this again next week.
Pray for safety for us Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Keep us from the virus.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you for doing that. Please be very safe and bless all those that you're serving.
Yep.
Yes. All right. You all have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon.
Yes,
See you
ma'am.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.